The rattle of the wheels has a special rhythm tonight, slow, thickened, as though the train were driving through something dense, through something substantial that offers resistance. It reminds me of a journey on the line from Bacharach to Bingen, through the Rhine Valley in the deepest autumn, when the leaves had already fallen and everything was gray, when the mist was so thick I thought the train no longer moved through the known world, but through something else, through a tear, through the liquid interior of something both sad and beautiful, through melancholy itself. The Rhine couldn't be seen, though we traveled beside it, though its water was directly outside the window, flowing, streaming, rushing, but completely, utterly, absolutely invisible. The fields not visible, not the vineyards on the slopes, not the plants, not the houses, the mountains, the famous, magnificent, majestic Rhine mountains, the cliffs, the castles, not visible. Only this white curtain, this mystical fabric of nothing and water, this veil of air and moisture pressing against the windows with force, dense, impenetrable, thick as a wall, like something that wanted in, that wanted to penetrate, that wanted to lull us. Like ghosts, like spirits, knocking gently, politely, waiting for entry, waiting patiently. Like someone outside, like a soul, a lost soul that wants to come home, that wants to return, but can't get in, isn't allowed in, is locked out of the world, has itself become mist. And the train went very slowly, slower than usual, like at walking pace, cautious, considered, full of awareness, as though stretching out hands, blind, helpless, to feel the rails in the darkness, in the wetness, in the mist, because the eyes couldn't do it anymore, because sight was no help, because everything was blind, everything white and blind and without direction, without orientation. I sat alone in this compartment, or at least, I wasn't sure, not really, not certain whether I was alone. Was I alone or not? The mist made it impossible to know, impossible to distinguish between presence and absence, between being and non-being. There was the silhouette of another passenger, 3 seats further down, a figure, an outline, a shadow. But the silhouette wasn't quite real, not quite solid, not quite present, not quite convincing. It could be human, a person, another traveler, a stranger, or mist itself, mist taking form, or memory, an old memory, a hallucination, a deception, a ghost, a phantom. And then, sometime in this boundless white time, this seemingly timeless journey, this journey without end, I understood slowly, after hours or minutes, I didn't know which, that the river valley itself was another passenger, that the landscape itself was traveling with me, that places live, that mountains think, that rivers feel. The Rhine sat across from me, invisible but absolutely present, breathing beside me, living in me. Autumn sat beside me, breathed into me, flowed through me, cold and damp and wise and old and infinitely melancholy. There was a moment, a rare, precious moment, a tearing, a breaking in the mist, a gap, not more than a second, fractions of a second, a fleeting breach in the white wall. And I saw the banks flowing past, swiftly past, rushing past, wet and black from rain, from water, dark, gray, real and substantial and immovable. And then the mist closed again, quickly, densely, drew together, closed like an eye, like a lid, and everything was white again, had always been white, had always been white. And that was enough, completely enough, more than enough. 1 second, one brief, precious second to know, to understand, that there's still a world out there, outside this white space, outside the mist, that there's still life, still things, still substance, still being, that there are banks, real, stony, mossy, authentic, present. That there is reality, solid and immovable and reliable, that isn't mist, that isn't illusion, that isn't dream. Even though everything right now is mist, even though mist seems to be everything, even though mist envelops everything.
The journey wasn't anxious, not tense, not full of fear or terror. It was calm, peaceful, meditative, like a meditation on being and non-being, like the interior of something vast, like sitting in the warm belly of a great whale, safe, sheltered. The train trusted the rails completely, blind, absolutely blind, without seeing, only feeling, touching, with the fingers of the wheels. The Rhine trusted its path, its course, which it has known for 1,000 years, which it knew before human time, from the beginning of the world. Autumn trusted in what comes, in the next season, in winter which was near. And I leaned my head against the window, felt the glass, cold glass, and felt the cold of the mist coming from outside, from without, penetrating, pervasive, but also protective. Also protective. I felt that too, understood that. And I also trusted without reason, without proof. I trusted that the darkness wouldn't lose me, that I wouldn't fall, that I was safe. I trusted that the mist was a teacher, a wise teacher, that mist could teach me, that blindness could clarify. Later, at Bingen, at the city, the mist began to lift, to clear, very slowly, agonizingly slowly, like a curtain rising centimeter by centimeter, a veil moving upward. Forms returned, things returned. Towers, old castle towers, trees, wet trees. Reality came back, piecemeal, moment by moment, again piecemeal. And the sight wasn't what it was before the mist came, not identical. It had become different and better. As though seeing with new eyes, with eyes that had learned from the mist, from this white time, that it's not important to see everything, the whole world, but only enough to continue, to know that the world is still there, that reality waits. Now I travel again through the night, another night, a new night, and everything is dark again, darkness again, the gentle blackness again. But it's not the dense, mystical mist of Bacharach, not that special mist, that supernatural mist, that mist that changed everything. It's the normal mist of night, the fine, natural mist of sleeping, the mist that comes gently, that welcomes me gently, that takes me in lovingly. And in it I am safe, absolutely safe, completely safe. In it I am home. I recognize myself. I know my place. The train knows its way, even without seeing, blind, trusts the rails completely, its long memory, its experience. The rails feel warm beneath me, feel like home, feel like dwelling. And I can't see where we are, can't see where we're going, can't know what place comes next. But that's all right, that's good, very good, that's perfect. I trust the train, trust the night, trust the path, trust life. My eyes grow heavy, heavier, weary from the darkness, from the gentle mist, from the tiredness that comes. And I sink, slowly I sink, and sink, ever deeper, into the darkness. And everything becomes slow, and quiet, and silent. And I am nowhere, and everywhere. And I am one with the path, and the path is one with me. And time stops. I'm at the Cider Maker on the Dülmen to Münster line on an autumn evening when the light was golden, when the leaves were brown and red and orange, falling, and the fields we passed were empty, harvested, exhausted, ready to rest.
She was a woman with very brown skin and hair silver gray that fell into her forehead like silver flowing down, like water, like light. She wore a leather suit, not fashion leather, not from the department store, not from designers, not beautiful, but work leather, practical leather, the leather that would smell after decades, worn, used, the color changed, lightened and darkened by sun and rain, by sweat, by time. And the pores in her hands were dark with leather dust, with leather meal that you breathe in when you work, that you inhale, that sits in the lungs from decades, perhaps since she was young, a girl, an apprentice.
She was a saddle maker, she said, calmly, without pride, but matter-of-factly, as though saying, I'm a cook, I'm a teacher. One of the last in Europe, perhaps even the last, she said. But that's speculative, I don't know. One of the last who makes saddles with craft. She makes saddles for old riders, for serious lovers of horses, for people who still know how it should be, how it's right. A saddle that doesn't separate rider from horse, doesn't isolate but connects, that unites the two in this old dance, this dialogue between human and animal. Modern is simple, quick, practical. Plastic, synthetic, Velcro, industrial, made in a factory by machines, without thought, without love. But right, a good saddle, a real saddle, is leather, real leather, high-quality leather, from cows, from animals, and stitches, hand-stitched by two hands, and patience, years of patience, decades of knowledge. She showed me her hands, slowly, carefully, as though opening a book and the story runs on the page. Each scar, each discoloration is a chapter, a year, a memory. Here was a scar from a knife, 1987, when she was still young and brave and careless, when her knife slipped and cut into the finger, into the flesh, deep. Here were stains from leather oil, dark brown, that never wash out, that seep into the skin and stay there forever, as a tattoo of work, as proof, as a badge. Here was a thickening on the side of the hand. She pointed to it, no pride, no drama, just fact. That's from 40 years of pricking, with the awl, the leather tool, the needle, with great force. The bone reshaped itself, the structure changed, because the force always came at this point, year after year, daily, 6,000 times a year, perhaps more. The bone is different now. I'm different now. She told me of a saddle she made 5 years ago, a decade ago almost, for a very old man whose horse was also very old, the same age or older. The horse's eyes were gray, she said, gray like stone, like old eyes, wise eyes. The man came to her and said simply, directly, I don't want to outlive this saddle. This will be my last saddle. He didn't say it dramatically, not desperately, just matter-of-factly, the way you say it will rain tomorrow, the way you say the sun sets. And she made it with this idea in her head, with this knowledge that this would be the last saddle this man would wear, would sit on between himself and his horse, at the end of his life, at the end of a journey. She took her time, not hasty, not rushed, but with a kind of calm, a kind of holiness. She chose the best leather from her best hides, the most tender, the softest, the leather ready to accompany a last journey, to hold a last connection. She stitched with a kind of tenderness you could call prayer, without calling it, without saying it aloud, stitch by stitch, needle by needle, each stitch a thought, a wish, a love, a greeting to this man she didn't know, would never know, but for whom she worked lovingly. The man died 3 months later, not long after, and his son wrote her a letter, a handwritten letter, on paper, with ink, real words, out of sorrow, out of gratitude. He said that his father rode every day, every morning on this horse, in this saddle, early mornings when the air was still cool, still pure, before the world woke up. And that was the best time of his life. Not because life had become better, not because miracles happened, not because medicine helped, but because his body felt it better.
because the saddle was so good, so perfect, that pain disappeared, that worries disappeared, that the world disappeared. The saddle was so good that the man forgot he was aging, that he would die, that he was tired, that he was lonely. He was only rider and horse and landscape, the trees, the meadows, the other riders who passed him. That was all there was. That was enough. That was heaven. She also told of young people, young folks who sometimes want to start with her, who want to learn the art, who see passion, but then understand that it's not art, not romantic, but work, hard work, patience, long patience. Never fame, never recognition, and most go away quickly, give up. Only very few stay, very few, perhaps one per decade. And those who stay become saddle makers not from ambition, not to earn money, not to become famous, but from a kind of love, a kind of obsession they can't explain, not literally. A love for leather, for craft, for perfection, for horses, for the way a saddle sits, exactly, rightly, how the stitches hold, how they don't tear, how a life is changed on it, how the world is transformed by a good saddle. A connection that is love. I asked her if sadness lives in this job, that you know all leather will eventually fail, that every saddle will eventually decay, age, fall apart, that cracks come, that the color fades, that the wood dries out, that everything is transience. She shook her head slowly, not dramatically, not wistfully. She said that transience doesn't make you sad, not really, if you accept that it's the condition of all things, not specific saddles, but everything, people, houses, countries, cultures, empires. What counts, she said, her voice grew louder, firmer, is that you make a saddle that's good while it exists, while time passes, that you use this time, these years, these decades, while the leather is still young, while the person still lives. Then you can die, peacefully, fulfilled, and the saddle will also die, decay, and the man will die, and his horse will die, and that's okay, that's right. That's part of the great rhythm, the great law. That's beautiful if you see it that way, if you accept it, if you understand the dance. The train began to slow down in Munster, to brake. The brakes hissed, loud, loud. And the saddle maker gazed out at the flat Munsterland landscape, green fields, endless fields, farms, small villages, horse meadows, green and golden. And I saw that her eyes focused on something that wasn't external, not on the fields, but internal. Perhaps on a saddle she'd start tomorrow, or on the last saddle she'd ever make, perhaps in a few years, or on all the saddles, all the hundreds, all the thousands of saddles behind her life, her work. And she said to me, not asking, but stating, not teaching, not lecturing, but simply true, a truth she'd lived. Do you know that the most beautiful saddles are the ones you don't use yourself? Those are for others, strange people, people I never know. And the others ride, and ride in beauty, in freedom, overcoming pain. And their joy, that's your reward. That's all you ever need. That's enough. That's more than enough. I look out at the dark earth, the black earth, and I sit here, in this train, which is also a saddle in a way, a metaphor, a connection between me and the earth that moves beneath me, that carries me, that holds me, safely. And I think of all the saddles, all the connections, all the works people make, with craft, lovingly, so that others can ride better, can live better, can be happy. And I grow heavier. Heavy as leather, and quieter, and my body becomes part of the train. Ta-dum, ta-dum. Like a saddle that sits perfectly, that's perfectly in place, on a horse that trusts. Warm. Right. Forever. And I breathe, slowly, finally, like a saddle that carries its whole life, its whole life. I met the cartographer on a train through the Alps, somewhere between Innsbruck and the Brenner Pass. Outside, everything was white. The mountains, the valleys, the little villages clinging to the slopes like birds' nests. The train climbed slowly, steadily, and the rattle of the wheels grew heavier, deeper, as though the train itself was struggling, as though it too had to breathe in this thin, cold air. It was early afternoon, but the sun already hung low, and the light was pale and golden, the light of a winter day slowly taking its leave. He was a lean man, in his early 80s, with rimless spectacles and eyes that reminded me of ink, dark blue, almost black, with a depth where you felt you might fall and not come back out. His fingers were long and thin and stained with ink, even though he hadn't drawn maps for years. "The inks seeped into my skin," he said later. "It's part of me, like the lines in my palms." On his lap lay a large, leather-bound book, which he opened sometimes and leafed through with the tenderness of someone reading old letters. The book, he explained to me, was his atlas. Not a printed one, not a purchased one, his own. For 45 years, he said, I drew maps, by hand, with pen and ink and watercolors, maps of places I'd traveled, maps of mountains I'd climbed, maps of rivers I'd followed, maps of forests I'd wandered through, each map a memory, each line a path I'd walked. He opened the book and showed me a page, a map of the Dolomites, drawn with such fine lines and such delicate colors it looked like a work of art. The mountain peaks in pale gray, the valleys in green, the streams in blue, the paths as thin red threads winding through the landscape, and everywhere tiny notes in a small, neat hand. Saw the golden eagle here, best water source here, sunset here that moved me to tears. He told me how he became a cartographer. As a child, he said, I drew treasure maps. In my grandmother's garden, where there was no treasure, only apple trees and gooseberry bushes and an old well. But I drew maps as though every stone were an adventure and every bush a secret. And then I grew older, and the treasure maps became real maps, and my grandmother's garden became the world. But really, he said, and smiled, a quiet, thoughtful smile. Really, I'm still drawing treasure maps. Except now, I know where the treasure lies. It lies in the walking, in the searching, in the path itself. He showed me a map of a valley in Switzerland, a small side valley that doesn't appear on any normal map. It took me 3 days to find it, he told me. 3 days during which I got lost and found myself and got lost again. And when I finally got there, it was the most beautiful place I've ever seen. A valley, green and still, with a small lake so clear you could count the stones on the bottom. And flowers, flowers everywhere, in colors I'd never seen. And not a person for miles. Just me and the valley and the silence. And I sat down and drew the map. Every curve of the stream, every bend of the path, every rock, every tree, every flower. And when I finished, I understood why I'd become a cartographer. Not to show others the way, but to understand the world, line by line, stroke by stroke. I asked him what he'd learned over all the years he'd spent mapping the world. and he closed the book, placed it on his lap, folded his ink-stained hands upon it, and said, "The most beautiful paths aren't on maps." That's the paradox of my profession. I've spent my whole life recording paths, passes and trails and roads and routes, thousands of kilometers fixed in ink on paper. But the paths that matter most to me, they're in no atlas, because they're not made of earth and stone. They're made of moments. "The path to the day I first saw my wife," he said. "The path to the evening my son took his first step. The path to the morning I stood on a mountain and suddenly understood how small I am and how vast the world. These paths you can't draw. You can only walk them and remember them and be grateful you found them, or that they found you. Because the best paths, you see, they find us, not the other way around." He got off at the Brenner into the cold mountain air, and I watched him cross the platform, slowly and upright, his leather book under his arm, his ink-stained hands in the pockets of his coat. A man who'd drawn the world line by line, and finally understood that the most important lines are invisible. The most beautiful paths aren't on maps. I carry that sentence with me. In moments when I need a plan, a direction, a certainty. Then I remember the cartographer, his ink-stained fingers, his leather book full of drawn worlds, his voice as quiet as the mountains we were passing through. The train carries on, and outside the mountains are only shadows now, great, silent shadows in the night, and the rattle of the wheels draws its own path. Ta-dum, ta-dum, a line of sound, drawing itself through the darkness, like a red line on an old map, on and on, ever quieter, until it fades into the silence, into the night, into the dreams waiting for us at the end of every path. I met the poet on the line from Strasbourg to Kael on one of those early morning trains, when the sun was just beginning to paint the fields golden and most people were still asleep, lost in dreams, their heads leaning against windows, their breathing slow and deep. He sat across from me, a lean man with white hair like snow, and the eyes of someone who'd spent years listening instead of speaking, observing, absorbing, as though his ears collected everything the way a net catches butterflies. He wrote in a notebook with a pencil that was nearly spent, the lead short and blunt, yet he kept writing tirelessly. The hand followed the rhythm of the train, as though the train itself had a tempo, a pulse, a breath, and the words hung along it like pearls on a string, each word a moment a color in the spectrum of waking, a part of the morning writing itself in his notebook. I asked him what he was writing, and he smiled without looking up from the paper, a fine, knowing smile, as though he'd heard this question 1,000 times, and there was a long, patient answer only he could give. He said he collected the words the train whispered into his ear, words that only come into being on rails, words only truly audible in the darkness of night, words that don't reveal themselves to one who doesn't listen, who doesn't really hear. "The rails sing," he said, with a conviction that allowed no question. If you listen long enough, really long, not just a minute or an hour, but for years, decades, a whole lifetime, they always sing the same song over and over. Ta-dum, ta-dum, ta-dum. But every night the song is different, because the night through which you travel is different, because every night carries its own story. The forest is not the same forest, not in relation to time, not in relation to season, not in relation to thought. The sky has different stars, different cloud formations, different lights. Even the fear you carry is not the same fear as before, but a new one you've taken with you like luggage on a journey. The man opened his notebook carefully, as though opening a bird, as though holding something living, something delicate that might fly away if you're not careful. The pages were filled with his fine handwriting, closely written, dense, each line a treasure, word for word, sentence for sentence, an archaeology of nights, night after night, each night a chapter in an endless novel. And he read me a few lines, with a voice that changed like weather changes, that deepened almost like another person, when he read the words as though he himself became the train, as though he let the train speak through his throat. I can't remember the exact words anymore, though I tried to hold them, but it was about a bird, a blackbird, a raven, or a crow, sitting on a telegraph wire high above the fields, at a height where only the wind touched it, watching the trains with an attention that knows no tiredness, as though counting a story, train by train, night by night, year by year. Every train was a verse, a stanza in an endless ballad. Every train was a stanza in a poem the bird was writing, without paper, without ink, only from observation and patience and the quiet, absolute certainty that everything that passes has meaning, that nothing passes without significance, that even the smallest movement counts. We sat for a long time in silence, the fields sliding past, green and awake, and the rhythm of the wheels was our conversation. The poet kept writing, ceaselessly, his fingers moving with a kind of trance, a meditation. I watched him make small notes in the margins of the paper, little signs, crosses, stars, dots, things only he would understand, his personal notation, his secret language of observation. He told me, with a voice that grew thinner, that sometimes he doesn't know whether the words come from the train or from within himself, whether he's the writer or merely the tool through which the rails speak. Sometimes, he said, I am the bird, the observer, the witness. Sometimes I am the telegraph wire, carrying the signals, connecting the messages. Sometimes I'm only the scale of the caterpillar, listening at night, tiny and still, trying to understand what the great ones are saying. Then he said something that remains in my ears to this day, as though he'd not merely told me it, but burned it into my heart, deep into the depth of my memory, where I can never let it go. He leaned forward, his eyes shone, and said, "The mistake most people make is thinking that poetry is something you have to invent, something artificial, something grand, something that only comes from the head, created by great poets, by people who've studied, who know how. But poetry is already everywhere, waiting on every platform, beneath every stone, in every corner. It just waits for someone to write it down, to see it, to really hear it, with an ear that's open. It lies in the rails, in the rhythms, in the nights, in the way rain strikes the window, how the drops dance, how the wind sings. The train doesn't invent its words. The train is poetry. The train is the poem itself, rushing and slow, rolling through darkness, through fields, through the souls of people who watch it. We're only the writers of night, writing down midnight after midnight what the rails dictate to us, what the night whispers to us as we travel and travel and travel without end." We drove on for a while in silence, a good silence, a silence not empty but filled with presence. The man kept writing tirelessly, his pen scratching on paper, a sound like footsteps on gravel, like small echoes. The fields slid past, still in that rose-gold light that only exists in these morning hours when the world isn't properly awake yet, still close to dream, still half caught in night. And I noticed I was beginning to hear his rhythm, not just with my ears, but with my whole body. His breathing rhythm, his writing rhythm, the way he held the silence between the words. And then the two merged, fused, became one. That ta-dum, ta-dum, ta-dum of the wheels was no longer a burden to me, no longer a noise I had to endure, but a comfort, like the heartbeat of someone sleeping beside me, peaceful and reliable. It was more than just sound. It was a breath, a breathing, a rhythm like life itself. It was the pulse of movement itself, and I was part of it, intertwined, connected, no longer separate from the journey, but woven into it. At Kale, he got off, carefully, with his notebook in his pocket, safely kept, the pages full of words I would never see, words that were like secrets, that belonged only to him, that had been entrusted to him by the rails themselves. But I watched how carefully he turned the pages, almost reverently, how dear every written word was to him, how valuable, as precious as gold coins, how he treated each word as though it were still warm from writing, still steaming with the power of the moment. And as the train began again, as Kale Station closed behind me, I heard the rails with different ears, with newborn ears, with the ears of someone who understood, no longer as sound, no longer as mechanical rattle, but as an attempt to tell a story, as conscious communication, as an offer to share the night in stanzas, to transform the darkness into verses, to make the impossible possible.
My eyes grow heavy from all the words I didn't write down, but which remain in me like an echo, like a song I can't forget even if I try. The rails keep singing, they don't stop. Ta-dum, ta-dum, ta-dum. An endless song. And somewhere in the darkness, someone is writing down what this rhythm means. Someone sits in another train and writes it down on another pencil with different words. And the words reach across the distance to hold hands, connect, speak with each other. I lean my head against the window, feel the cool smoothness against my forehead. The fields disappear behind me, layer by layer, like memories dissolving. The sun sinks deeper and deeper. The sky grows soft, and everything becomes slow, gentle, warm. And the words rest in me like seeds waiting for spring. On the line from Goslar to Wernigerode, through the Harz, through the old, dark, beautiful forests of the Harz, I met a man whose entire attention lay on the window, concentrated, absolute, as though it were the most important window of his journey, as though the whole world revealed itself outside this one pane. Summer was warm, truly warm. The air moved swiftly past, bright and full of insects, of life, of movement, of the season's energy. And this man, perhaps 50 years old, perhaps older, gray at the temples like a mountain with snowflakes, sat perfectly still, motionless, and looked out as though waiting for something only he could see, something subtle, something requiring his patience, all his patience, all the years of patience he'd saved. I asked him what he was looking for, and he said, without turning his gaze, without hesitating even a second, with a certainty that knew no doubt, a roe deer. Every summer, at the same time, on this same route, a roe deer stands at the forest edge and watches the train pass, observes us, as though bidding us farewell, train by train, year by year. I first saw it 16 years ago, completely unexpected, from the window without looking for it. And since then, I take this route when summer comes, at the same time, every day if necessary, to find it. And I wait. I wait, patiently, without impatience, because there are reasons to wait, deep reasons, reasons older than I am, reasons written into nature itself. His hands rested on his knees, quiet, completely quiet, without impatience, without the tremor of impatience, old and familiar with waiting, experienced in this discipline of patience, a patience not learned,
but inherited, generation to generation. He explained to me with a gentle voice that sounded like a forest voice that a roe deer is a fleeting thing, that nothing in nature stays longer than a moment if it doesn't wish to, if it hasn't the grace, that animals are wild and don't think of people, that they follow their own laws, their own rhythms. For a moment it's there, eating from a leaf, or alert, careful, tense, ready to flee, muscles tight, senses sharp, and then it's gone, vanishes into the trees, into the forest's depths, away, forgotten, as though it had never existed. But this one roe deer, it comes back, over and over, faithful, constant, reliable. Year after year, summer after summer, reliable as clockwork, like an old railway, like the stars, reliable as the seasons, as the turning of day and night, as the earth rotating. And in all those years, the deer has grown older, visibly older, its coat grayer, marked by time, by seasons, by fights with other deer, its movements perhaps slower, wearier, more cautious, and yet it still stands, still waits, still stands at the same place, at the same forest edge, where I first saw it, where it all began, where the story started, this marvelous, quiet story. It waits in the same way I wait, patiently, unconditionally, without knowing I wait, without knowing it's given me hope back, that it's given hope back to thousands of people, that such a thing as faithfulness exists, that it's possible to be faithful, that nature too is faithful. I asked him how he could be certain it was the same roe deer, that the years hadn't deceived him, that his memory hadn't played tricks. And he smiled, a wise old smile, a smile that understood. He said that perhaps it isn't the same one. No, probably it isn't the same. That a roe deer lives only 20 years, perhaps less. Perhaps it's a different one each year, the sons or daughters or grandchildren of the first, a generation after another, all young and wild and new. But it doesn't matter, absolutely doesn't matter. The place is the same, this forest edge, this point on the map, this place of meeting. The moment is the same, this summer, this time of day, this hour. And when I see a roe deer there, then it's the right roe deer, the only roe deer, the deer I'm looking for, because it feels right, deeply right. That's all that matters, not the truth of the object, not the biological identity, but the truth of the experience, the truth of faithfulness, even if it renews itself. As we went round a curve, very slowly, as though the train itself knew what was coming, the man tensed, froze, focused, and said only, "There." Just that one word, but it was a whole sentence, an entire poem. And I saw it too, saw it exactly in that moment, as though my eye were drawn by his. A single deer, grayish-brown like a stone, with dark eyes, sharp watching, attentive, at the forest's edge, so still it didn't seem alive, motionless as a statue, as a thought, as a memory suddenly there again, manifesting itself. It was as though it had been waiting for this exact moment, for the train on this curve, for exactly this train, with exactly this man at the window, for this meeting that repeats itself every year like a ritual. The man leaned forward, slowly, with reverence, not with excitement, not with loud movement, but with a deep calm, with a love that was quiet, as though permitting his heart to beat faster, just slightly faster, as though he were allowed to say that he was happy, that he was grateful. It was as though greeting an old, beloved friend, a friend from 1,000 summers, from a lifetime, a friend punctual as clockwork, who kept time, who remained faithful, who didn't leave, who didn't forget. The roe deer disappeared from view, quickly now. The window scrolled past. The trees took its place. The forest wall closed again, and the man leaned slowly back, carefully, as though setting down something delicate, with a sigh that wasn't sad, but fulfilled, satisfied, a kind of gratitude in the breath. He smiled, a slow smile, a smile that knew. It was the smile of someone who knows that something seemingly impossible is possible, that it's possible to see the same thing every year and have it always be different, always new, always surprising. The impossible thing is that nature is punctual, that it bends down to the human. The impossible thing is that something so wild, so free as a deer, holds to this, every year at the same time in the same place, as though there'd been a promise, an unspoken promise, between a man and a creature.
We didn't speak much after that moment. Didn't need many words. The man returned to the window, leaning out, waiting, perhaps for a repetition, a second chance, perhaps just to make sure it had been real, that he hadn't dreamed it. And I saw that perhaps he wasn't speaking to me to entertain me or to prove anything. He spoke only because someone was needed who understood what it means to have a reason to go again, again and again, without tiredness, without despair. A reason to be punctual, so the world can also be punctual, so order is maintained, so faithfulness remains visible in the world, so people know that faithfulness is possible, that it's not for nothing to love, to wait, to believe. Now, in the darkness of another night, I travel and think of the roe deer, of this man, of the improbability of this faithfulness, of its beauty. I think how thin the line is between chance and faithfulness, how thin as silk, how easy to tear and yet so incredibly strong, indestructible. The train carries on through the night, night after night. The forests slide past, black and endless, mystical, deep. And somewhere at the forest's edge, something waits for me, something faithful that I don't yet see, but that's there. Something that will be punctual, punctual as clockwork, like a promise. Something that's always been punctual, reliable. Because love is punctual, because it is faithfulness, because it holds. And my eyes grow heavy from this certainty, this truth, this good truth. On the route from Plauen to Zwickau, through the Saxon landscape with its endless field patterns, I met a woman who'd just retired from teaching, whose last school day was only a few weeks behind her. She was perhaps in her mid-60s, with fine lines around her eyes and gray hair neatly pinned up, and autumn was painting the trees outside orange and gold, flaming, glowing, a firework of the season. And she seemed as though leaving a place for the first time in many years, a very important place, a place she hadn't merely visited, but built, shaped, with her time, her love, her commitment. She told me, with a voice that was tired but still clear, that she'd taught in a village for 40 years, always in the same school, in the same classroom. 4 decades, 4 full decades. She knew the names of all the children who'd passed through that school in that time, hundreds, perhaps thousands. She knew the names of their parents, and often their stories too, their struggles, their dreams. She even knew the names of some of their grandparents, or at least their faces, their stories, which the children had told her. The village was her classroom and her world at once, inseparable, intertwined, one single thing. But then, she said, it became time to go, as it does for everyone, inevitably. Like the seasons, like the years. Time comes for everyone, and no one can hide from it. The school superintendent came one day, a man she didn't know, and said the schools must be made younger. Time moves forward. There are new methods, more modern ways. There are new teachers, young teachers who understand the future. She understood it once, that she would have to go eventually, that this day would come, that she couldn't stay, that she wouldn't die in her classroom hunched over a book, that wouldn't happen. And there was a farewell celebration, a great party, surprisingly grand,
And all her students, all the many generations, 40 years of them, decades of classes, came, streamed in to say goodbye, coming from the city, from their work, from their lives, some with train journeys taking hours, some by car, some on foot. Some of them were now parents themselves, with gray hair, broader in the face, older, changed. Some had children who'd come to her class later, their own children, a continuity, a continuation. And all came to say thank you for something the teacher had taught them, which they themselves could no longer express because it was too big, too important, too fundamental, already too far in the past. She showed me a photograph of the farewell, carefully, the way one shows something sacred. A large photograph, black and white or faded like an old memory. The school hall was full, fuller than ever, fuller than on any school day. People stood at the walls, stood everywhere, at every corner, in every nook, pressed close together, waiting to shake her hand, to tell her, thank you. Just that word, thank you, but with whole hearts. In the photograph, the woman looked as though floating, as though not quite real, not quite of this world, overwhelmed by this love, by this gratitude, by this absolute truth that she'd been important for 40 years, that her work mattered, that she hadn't lived in vain. She drew a letter from her pocket, carefully, guarded, as though holding something delicate. Handwritten in clean, steady script. A former student had written it, now a doctor in the city, an important man who saves lives. He wrote that he couldn't remember what the teacher had taught about mathematics, that the formulas were long forgotten, the theorems, the rules. But he remembered, clear and vivid, that she'd taught him to look, really look. To look when it hurt, when pain was present. To look when he was afraid, when fear was overwhelming. Not to look away, not to ignore, not to suppress. That was the first thing a doctor had to do. That was the most important. That was the first thing this teacher, this simple village school teacher, had taught. The woman told me, with a voice trying to stay strong, that she now didn't know what to do with her time. How one spends a day when the structure is gone, when routine no longer exists. The morning when she wakes is no longer filled with purpose, with goal, with something that must be done. The schoolyard doesn't wait for her, the bell doesn't ring, the classrooms are empty. The children, the grown-up children, don't know that the teacher is now free, that she has a holiday forever, or what that means, how it feels not to be needed anymore. She said it was strange, peculiar, to practice a craft your whole life long and then suddenly discover that the craft was you, that it wasn't separate from yourself, that identity and work were one and the same, not to be separated, merged, dissolved into each other. She looked out the window, out into the autumn landscape, the leaves falling and falling, and I saw that autumn meant a great change for her, more than a season, almost a turning point. Not just the end of a year, but the end of an epoch, of an entire era that was hers, that she'd built. The end of a role, a shape she'd worn for 40 years, like a second skin, like bones, like flesh, grown with her, part of her. The teacher wasn't just a profession for her, it was an identity, a way of breathing, a way of existing, a way of being present in the world. And now she had to learn again, almost like a child, who she was when she was no longer the teacher, when the classroom emptied, when the schoolyard belonged to the new young teacher, when the students no longer needed her. I said to her, quietly, warmly, "But you taught what matters, what really counts. You taught how to see, truly see. One doesn't forget that, never. One can't forget it, even trying, even as the years pass. One passes it on without intention, hand to hand, heart to heart, as though flying through the air, invisible. You're no longer the village teacher, no longer in the same place. But the things you taught, the truths, they live on in all the people you knew, all the generations, decades of students. They're not visible, but they're everywhere, all around us. In the way a mother looks at her child, with attention, with love, in the way a doctor listens, really listens, in the way someone understands that life matters, that every life has value. We drove for a long time in silence, and the woman held the letter in her hands, and I saw that she remembered. She remembered the boy who was afraid of mathematics, but who learned to look rather than look away. And now that boy was a doctor, and he saved lives because an old teacher had taught him to see the truth, even when it hurt. The woman nodded, very slowly, as though stretching time, and it seemed to help her hear that, finally to understand that the work wasn't finished, that it would live on. The train carried on through the autumn landscape, calm, gentle. The leaves seemed even more golden, even more precious, even more valuable than before. Because it was the end. Because life is finite and therefore precious. Because everything is finite. And I lean my head back. The fields are warm in this last light of the day, golden, orange, red. And I think of all the things I've been taught, without knowing it, sometimes in passing, by people whose names I've forgotten, whose faces have grown dim. And my thoughts grow slow, grow slower, and gentle, and peaceful, and full of gratitude for all who taught, for all who waited. On the route from Bregenz to Dornbirn, through the beautiful, majestic Vorarlberg Mountains, with their green slopes and dark forests. In summer, when the night wasn't quite dark yet, still pale, still silvery, and the mountains to the east still glowed like yesterday, still golden, still gentle, still welcoming. I met a man holding a compass in his hand, concentrated, testing, observing, attentive. An antique compass, very old, probably 100 years or older, possibly 150 years, made of brass, polished bright, gleaming like copper, with Arabic numerals instead of Roman ones, its surface worn from generations of hands that had held it. And he held it as though checking something important, over and over again, ritualistically, glancing past the window, out at the landscape, then down at the compass in his hand, as though comparing two stories, two truths, two versions of reality, two ways of understanding the world. I asked him where he was going, and he said, without looking at me, without turning his gaze from the window, "Nowhere, not really." But the train, he said, with a certainty that allowed no questions, doesn't go where it thinks it goes, not really. Not if you look closely. The train thinks it's going to Dornbirn. That's the plan, the announcement at the station. That's what everyone believes, what everyone accepts without thinking. But if you really pay attention, if you look closely, eyes open, mind awake, his train actually goes northwest, in a different direction than the timetable says. Either the rails lie or the timetable lies, but the compass never lies, never. The compass can't lie. The compass tells the truth, the magnetic truth, absolute, unchangeable. It wasn't confusion in his mind. Not an old man who'd lost touch with reality, who'd gone mad. It was the calm, quiet observation of someone who'd watched reality carefully, who was vigilant, who didn't sleep, who'd listened. He explained to me, with a voice that was quiet but firm, that cartographers name the routes, that they take paper and write words on it, symbols, lines, coordinates. But nature doesn't care about names or paper, about human systems. Nature only knows directions, truths, about magnetic fields, about forces older than people, about what is really true. And this train, here in this moment, with its cargo of sleeping people, of dreamers, with me, with him, with all the hope and tiredness and longing, goes northwest, no matter what the timetable says, no matter what the announcer says, no matter what the newspaper says. He showed me the compass, held it out to me carefully, with respect, as though I were approaching a sacred relic, as though I should bow before something valuable, something precious that must be respected. The needle pointed steadily northwest, constant, reliable, unchanging. It didn't waver, not even a tremor, no vibration. It didn't doubt, no uncertainty, no question. It was sure, absolutely sure, completely sure, unshakably sure, as only a magnetic needle can be when it comes to truth, to reality, to being. There was a beauty in this inflexibility, in this unwavering certainty, in this refusal to harbor any doubt, in this absolute faithfulness to truth. The needle didn't ask whether it was right, whether it was good. It didn't ask whether the train was on the right rails, whether we were going to the right place, whether we'd be happy. It only showed what is real, without judging, without evaluating, without hoping, without hope or fear, without feeling. And it was calming, incredibly calming, extraordinarily calming. Calming like something that's done the same for millennia, that's been there, unchanged. To have a compass that doesn't lie, that isn't polite, that only tells the truth, always the truth, the magnetic, non-negotiable, irrefutable, inalienable truth.
The man said he was a cartographer by profession, a specialist, an expert,
someone who designed maps, who represented the world on paper, but a thinker in his leisure time, in the evenings when work was done, a guardian of truth, a guardian of reality, someone who understood. A cartographer, he said, with a voice showing recognition, must know that maps are lies, beautiful lies, sometimes necessary lies, but lies nonetheless. Simplifications, reductions, abstractions. The best map isn't reality, but merely a proposal, an agreement between people, a consensus, a compromise, how they want to see the world, how they want to represent it to others, how they want to reduce complex reality into something manageable. But the compass was different, fundamentally different. Was no proposal, no agreement, no consensus, no reduction. The compass was a promise, an absolute, irrevocable pledge. A promise that north is still north, that reality is stable, that continuity exists, that there's something to rely on, to build on eternally, something that doesn't deceive, that doesn't lie, that tells the truth.
He showed me also the back of the compass, carefully, reverently, with the respect one gives an old friend. There an inscription was engraved, old letters, almost ancient, faded, barely legible, like words time had almost erased. I couldn't read everything, but I saw dates, numerals, years, a name perhaps. Probably when the compass was made, or who created it, who was its maker, which craftsman had affixed this needle. The man said, with pride in his voice, that this is over 100 years old, 120 years at least, probably 150, perhaps even older. This compass is older than his father, older than any life he'd known, older than his grandparents, older than the station we'll depart from, older than the railway at this place, older than most people who've ever traveled this route. But it still works perfectly, constantly, as though time doesn't touch it, as though age doesn't weaken it. The needle is still faithful, reliable, absolutely reliable. Faithful like an old, eternal love that doesn't diminish. We sat for a long time in silence, in good, fulfilled silence, in the silence of contentment, of understanding. And the man looked alternately out the window, at the landscape, the mountains, the fields, and at his compass in his hand, as though reading two books, both telling the same story but written in different languages, different symbols, different truths that complemented each other.
And I had the impression that he wasn't bored, no, the opposite, but that he was enjoying this moment, that he was very happy, satisfied, that he had peace, inner calm, that he was at one with himself, not torn apart. Enjoying this small discrepancy, this small, beautiful difference between what the train thought it was doing and said aloud, and what the compass actually saw, actually knew, the truth that wasn't a lie. It was like a secret, a private, personal secret that only the two shared, he and the compass, this old, ancient friendship, 100 years old at least, perhaps longer, a relationship that needed no language, only trust, only faith, only mutual understanding. Later, alone in my compartment, I think of the man and his compass, of this strange friendship between a person and an instrument. I think of how I've often been lost, even though I knew my name and had my schedule in my pocket. That I often long for north, south, east, west, even though I'm not sure which direction is good, which leads home, where home even is. The train carries on through the bright summer night, through the dusk, through the gentle darkness. The direction reveals itself slowly, like a revelation, and somewhere there is north, really north, irrevocable, reliable. And my head lowers and everything grows quiet, ever quieter. And I trust the compass in my heart, my inner compass, that also points north. On the line from Hamburg to Buchholz, through the green, flat, northern German landscapes, in a quiet train compartment occupied only by the two of us, calm, peaceful, I met a woman, an older woman, perhaps 60 or 70, who carried with her a beautiful wooden box, an artful box, decorated with fine, intricate lines and patterns, carefully carved, like lace made of wood, like a work of art, opening like a jewelry casket, like a religious shrine, like something sacred. When she opened it, carefully, reverently, with the movements of a priestess, a scent poured out immediately, intense, warm, complex, spicy, that filled the entire compartment, that entered my nostrils, penetrated deeply, into my lungs, into my memory, into my unconscious. A scent that smelled like a journey, like a long, marvelous journey. A journey through years, through countries, through continents, through times, through love, through everything there is. She said the box had been in her family for 50 years, perhaps longer, perhaps 60 years. Time blurs. Her grandfather, a merchant, a wealthy man, a world traveler, had commissioned it from a famous carpenter, had personally instructed the craftsman, and every drawer was reserved for a spice, had its own compartment, its own place. But not just any spices, not ordinary spices from the market. Spices that each had a name, that each had a story, a person. This cardamom was from her grandfather's first journey to India, from his arrival in Bombay. This cinnamon was from her grandmother's wedding, from the cake at the celebration. Each jar was a story, each a chapter in the family's life. She showed me a small glass container with dried flowers, tiny, delicate, fragile, precious as the rarest jewels. The red flowers of saffron. She said it was saffron, but not for the kitchen, not for eating, though it was meant for eating, though one could eat it, though it longed to be eaten. This was saffron that her grandmother had been given, back when she was pregnant with the woman's mother, by an old woman in town, an herbalist, a wise woman, a healer, who said that this saffron would protect the child, that this precious, holy scent would protect the unborn from illness, from danger, from all evil, from the world. The grandmother had kept it all those long years. through 2 wars, through bombings, through 2 moves, through 3 countries. The container taken with her on the journey through life, guarded like a sacred amulet, like something magical. And then, when the grandmother died, old and weary, the daughter inherited the saffron, the small container, the continuity, the tradition, the love. And now the woman in her compartment held it in her hands, carefully, reverently, with her whole soul. And it was as though holding a physical connection to this grandmother she'd never known, who lived only in photographs, in others' stories, in memory, through the scent that hadn't changed, hadn't grown weaker, hadn't aged, that still smelled of hope, of protection, of love, of continuity. I asked her whether she'd ever used any of these spices, for cooking, for eating, for enjoying, to season dishes. And she smiled, a soft, sad smile, and shook her head slowly. She said she preferred to wait, preferred to preserve them until the right moment came, the true moment. The moment when she needed these spices, not for eating, not for everyday use, but for remembering, for carrying a story, for living a connection, for holding fast to a love that has ended. And that could be years, years of waiting, of preservation, of protection. That could be decades, a whole lifetime, until she died. But the scent, she said, doesn't lose itself, doesn't grow weaker. The scent remains constant, steady. The scent waits patiently, timeless, behind locked glass walls, behind the wood of the box, protected. The scent is like time that doesn't pass, that is preserved, that is caught, that is kept, that doesn't change, that is immortal. She opened the individual drawers very slowly, with great care, showed me each spice's name, each jar. Cumin, that came from a journey to Marrakesh from Morocco. Cloves, that the grandmother herself had picked by hand from a tree in her garden. Pepper, black and precious, from a deceased uncle who was a merchant, who knew the world. Each drawer was a life, a complete story, a person, an experience. Each drawer was a name, a voice that still speaks. Each drawer was a moment, a meaningful moment that had been preserved to live on, to not be lost. She told me about her daughter, who kept asking again and again why the mother didn't have this box on a shelf, why the mother didn't show it, why it wasn't used, why the spices didn't go into the kitchen. The daughter didn't understand, simply didn't understand, that some things are precious precisely because you don't see them, precisely because you guard them like a secret, precisely because their absence creates their presence. The daughter wanted the mother to use the spices, for them to live, for them to scent the kitchens, for them to be consumed, for them to become part of life. But the mother knew better, knew it from experience, from love. She knew that a scent that is used, burned, exhausted, is lost forever, gone, no longer to be smelled, while a scent that is preserved, protected, conserved, can stay with you forever, always, across countries, across death, across times. But one day, the woman said, with certainty, when the daughter is old, when she herself becomes a grandmother, when she has children of her own, grandchildren, when she herself has something she wants to preserve, that she wants to love, then the daughter will understand that this box is the most important thing one can inherit. Not gold, not wealth, not money, not fortune, not houses, not property, but scent, memory, love. Scent is memory that breathes, that lives, that loves, that is passed on. I watched with great respect as she carefully closed the box again, gently, with reverence, each jar back in its place, in the right drawer, in the right order, as though performing a sacred ritual, as though making a promise that these spices would wait still, would wait patiently still, for 100 years if necessary, for the right moment, for the right hand, for the right story, for someone who would appreciate them, for a reason that nature would understand. She got off in Buchholz, a small, quiet town, and the box was back in her bag, orderly, hidden, stowed, but present, there, not forgotten, not lost. And I sit here and think of all the hidden boxes people carry with them through their lives, all their treasures, all the scents waiting patiently, timelessly, all the memories waiting to be smelled, felt, touched, brought to life, awakened again. All the people dragging their beloved with them on trains, in their pockets, in their hearts, searching for a place to share these goods. The train carries on, faster now, through the night, through the darkness. I still smell a hint of cardamom in the air, still present, still strong. Or am I only imagining it? Is it only memory playing tricks on me? Imagination? And it makes no difference, none, absolutely none. The scent is real, real and true, whether it's objectively in the air, hovering, or only in me, in my memory, in my heart, in my soul. And I lean back, relax, and my eyes grow heavy, weaker, from the scent, from the memory, from the love that speaks through the years, and everything grows warm and dark and gentle, and I rest, sleep, dream. On the route from Stuttgart to Schwäbisch Hall, through the Swabian landscape with its gentle hills and green valleys, I met a man whose entire body was hungry for rest, for silence, for peace. He was perhaps 40, perhaps younger, but he looked tired, drained, like someone who hadn't slept in a long time, not because he couldn't, but because everywhere he was, everywhere, there was constant noise, endless noise. His clothing was neat, clean, normal, but his eyes were worried, evasive, as though he'd lost himself, as though the tiredness had hollowed him out. I asked him where he came from, and he said, with a voice that was hoarse, exhausted, "From the city. From a big city where there's not a moment of silence, not a second, not a single second. The noise is constant, permanent, omnipresent, and it has no source and no end, is boundless. It's not like a street with cars where you know where the noise comes from, where it originates, where the sounds stem from. It's a general noise, a diffuse noise, a fabric from which the air itself is made, from which the world consists." He told me, with a voice showing desperation, that he'd started traveling at night just to find 1 hour, just 1 hour, when it's quieter, when silence at least begins to exist. First, he tried train journeys at midnight. Then, as that wasn't enough, at 1 o'clock in the morning. Then at 3 o'clock, the deepest night. The window had to be closed, completely closed, tightly. Nobody could be in the compartment except him, no other people, no foreign bodies. The train had to travel on a route, on a line where there were few stations, where the train didn't stop and go, didn't brake and whistle. All these conditions, these strict conditions, he had to meet them, laboriously meet them, to find 1 hour of real silence, real, true silence. "And why exactly Stuttgart to Schwäbisch Hall?" I asked him. And he said thoughtfully, considering, "Because this route has the silence I need, that I desperately need. Not silence like absence, like lack of sound, but silence like a presence, like something that's there, that breathes, that lives." The train travels through small villages, through small sleeping villages, through small forests, dense green forests, and the rails are old, almost antique, and the rhythm is slow, leisurely, without haste. Ta-dum, ta-dum, ta-dum. A steady beat. That's a noise, yes, superficially a noise, but it's a noise I understand, that I know, that doesn't hurt me. I can breathe with this noise, can sleep in this rhythm, can rest in it. He told me, urgently, that most people think silence is something you can find easily, like a city you visit, like a place, a tourist destination where you go and where silence waits for you, waits. But silence is something else, something subtler, something you must negotiate with yourself, something that must negotiate with you, that wants to know you, that needs your trust. Silence is something you must earn, must work for, through attention, through mindful presence, through consciously stopping noise inside yourself, internal sounds. And when you're young, when you're in the city, when you're making a career, ambitious, you have no time to learn that, no time to negotiate with silence, no time to allow silence. Only when you're exhausted, when you really can't anymore, when the body says, cries out, that it's enough, that I can't endure another second, then you begin to understand, to truly understand, that silence isn't desolation, isn't emptiness, but a form of love, a true form of compassion. That silence is something that holds you, that carries you, that saves you. I asked him hopefully whether he ever wanted to go home, back to his life, whether he didn't want to leave the city permanently, definitively, whether he didn't want to drive away and never come back. And he said sadly, I always go back. I always go back, have to go back. I go back because the city is my life, because it is my life, my whole life. Though it hurts, though the pain is great. I go back because the people I love are there, waiting there, living there, because I can't leave them, because I couldn't bear to lose them. Because love too can be bound to noise, to chaotic times. But I also travel back and forth, again and again, 1,000 times, 100,000 times if necessary, because I must learn to live in both worlds, to survive. In the world of noise, the city, the people, and in the world of silence, the night, the railway. In the world of the daily, the normal, and in the world of night, of beauty. And the more I travel, the more I understand that silence isn't the opposite of noise, not the antonym, but the way to endure it, to live with it, the way to accept it, to understand it, the way to love it even. I asked him, quietly, carefully, whether he'd ever found a place where silence is permanent, where it stays, where you don't have to drive away, travel away to find it, to experience it. And he said, slowly, No, I haven't found such a place. Perhaps there is no such place on this earth, not for people. Or perhaps it's the place I go to when I die, the final rest, eternal peace. But here, in this world, in this life, silence is always fleeting, always transient, always limited. You have to take it, moment by moment, hour by hour. You have to fetch it yourself, travel, seek it on the train. That's okay, I accept that. That's enough for me, completely enough. That will do. He stood up slowly, carefully, to get off, to end the journey. Schwäbisch Hall, a small town, perhaps a quiet town, a town where he could find silence, at least for one night, at least for 1 hour. And I saw that he was still tired, still exhausted, but now differently, in a different way. Now it was the tiredness of someone who has learned that rest isn't sleep, but a way of seeing, a way of breathing, a way of being, a way of looking at things so that you can continue, that you can live in a world that's too loud, too chaotic, but also beautiful.
The train carries on, travels through the night, travels toward new destinations.
And I sit here in the dark, here in the rolling of the train. And I try to find silence between the words, to feel it, to grasp it. The silence between the breaths, between the heartbeats. And I'm grateful for this man, grateful for his wisdom, grateful that he's shown me that silence is something you carry with you, always, everywhere. That you don't lose it, never. That you can always return to it when you're tired. And my eyes grow heavy, heavier, grow dark, and the noise of the wheels grows quieter, quieter. And the silence comes closer, comes to me, slowly, tenderly, finally, gently, truly.
On the route from Bregenz to Feldkirch, through the wonderful Vorarlberg with its apple orchards and growing regions, in the deepest autumn, just as the apples had been harvested, thousands of them, and the scent of cider, of freshly pressed juice, still clung to the fingers, hovered in the air. I met a woman, an older woman, perhaps 60 or 70, who told me that she'd just pressed the very last batch of cider for this year, for this season. Her hands were dark red stained from juice, from apple juice, from weeks of labor, and she looked exhausted, as though she had a long, long journey behind her, an odyssey, though we were only traveling 2 small stations, just a few minutes. She told me, with a smile that showed wisdom, that cider making, that pressing, isn't a craft for the impatient, not a profession for those who want quick results. In spring you must prune the trees, gently, with love, without hurting them, without damaging them. In summer you must wait, only wait endlessly while the fruit grows on the trees, ripens. In autumn, when it's finally time to gather, to harvest the apples, you must wait again, always wait, because the apples don't all ripen at once, not all at the same time, but one after another, individually, slowly. And you must examine each one, inspect it, whether it's ready, ripe enough, sweet enough, perfect enough. Then comes the cider itself, the magical moment, the precious, the sacred. You press the apples, squeeze them, crush them, and the juice flows out like a promise, like a revelation of sweetness, of possibility, of future. But the promise isn't yet fulfilled, not yet complete, not yet realized. The cider must ferment, must work, must develop, and that takes weeks, long weeks, during which nothing visible happens, during which everything is hidden, during which the process takes place secretly. The cider must age, must wait patiently, in great wooden barrels, in a cool cellar, in the darkness, in the silence. And you can't look inside, can't monitor, can't see. You must simply trust blindly, with all your soul. And at the end of this waiting, after the long, agonizing waiting, sometimes the cider spoils, goes wrong. Sometimes it becomes vinegar, becomes something sour, something unusable, because the fermentation was too fast or too slow, too hot or too cold, because the time wasn't right, because the conditions weren't correct. Sometimes it becomes bitter, unpalatable, bad, because you didn't meet one single condition properly, because you overlooked a critical moment, because love was lacking. She said, thoughtfully, that cider making has taught about life, that good work doesn't mean working hard or working fast, faster than others, better than others, more ambitious. It means doing the right thing at the right time, perfectly timed, precisely tuned, like a dancer who knows her partner, who is one with him, and then to wait patiently, unconditionally, until time knows, until nature knows that it's finished, that the cider is ripe, that it's time.
It means recognizing the moment, sensing it, the exact, critical moment when something is ready, and not forcing it, not pushing, not an hour earlier when you grow impatient, when you're afraid, not an hour later when you've forgotten it, been distracted. To recognize the moment and honor it, to respect it, to accept it.
She also said, with conviction, that the best teacher is nature, nature itself.
Nature teaches patience, not through speech, not through words, but through waiting, through experiencing success, through experiencing processes that can't be accelerated. Nature teaches timing, not through instruction, not through books, but through consequence, through reliability, through the consequences of mistakes. If you set the conditions right, if you're attentive, if you have real attention, then the right thing happens, the good, the beautiful, without you having to grasp, without you having to control. Nature trusts you if you trust it. You must trust it, blindly, absolutely, with all your soul. I asked her, curious, carefully, whether she'd ever spoiled the cider, whether it could have been spoiled, and she smiled, a sad smile, with a wistful look, with a gaze that's seen much, that's learned much. She said yes, with certainty. Many, very many. Too many to count, too many to remember. And the first time, she said, it was frightening, a feeling like a betrayal by nature, like a guilt you couldn't wash away, that you carry with you. The second time, it was sad, melancholy, bitter, a pain that is timeless, that doesn't pass. The third time, after years, she understood, finally grasped, that spoiling is also part of the process, that spoiling isn't the end, isn't failure, but a moment, an instant in the great cycle, in the eternal process. A spoiled cider teaches more than a perfect cider, teaches much more, teaches truth, because you learn what you could have done differently, where you lost the critical moment, where attention was lacking. And that learning is precious, valuable, precious, even if the loss is also expensive, even if painful. She pulled a small container of cider from her pocket, a small glass, lovingly, and handed it to me, carefully, tenderly, like giving something sacred, like handing over a newborn child. She said it wasn't for drinking, not for tasting, but only for smelling, for experiencing with the sense of smell. And when I smell it, when I experience this scent, when I breathe it in deeply, then I also experience, I also feel all the months of patience, all the long waiting days, all the weeks and weeks when she went down into the cellar, down into the cold, into the darkness, and listened into the cider. Listened to hear, to feel whether it was content, whether it was still fermenting, whether it was still alive, whether the miracle was still happening. She got off at Feldkirch, a small, small town on the Rhine, and the bottle of cider remained with me, in my hand, warm from my palm, warm from my body heat. And I smell it, breathe it in deeply, take the scent into my lungs, and the smell is, yes, it's cider, but it's also more. It's time itself, condensed, concentrated, gathered. It's all the time, in concentrated, fragrant form, in liquid form. It's autumn in a small container, is patience in liquid, is love, true love, in a glass. And I lean back, lean my head against the window, against the cool glass, and I smell this deep, dark, sweet fruitfulness, this infinite sweetness, this sweetness that emerged from long patience, that was born from trust. And my eyes grow heavy, heavier, weary from waiting, from the deep understanding that has just finally ended, that has fulfilled itself in this moment. And I'm finally allowed to rest too, like the cider rested, in the darkness of the cellar rooms, in the cold, with infinite patience, with trust in nature, in life, On the route from Bern to Interlaken, through the Swiss Alps, with their majestic mountains and rolling green meadows like a melody, in summer, when the nights were still bright well past 10 o'clock, nearly 11, still glowing, golden, pink in the sky, I met a child, a young child traveling alone on this route, independent and self-assured, brave almost, and carrying a notebook, precious, carefully guarded like treasure. The child could have been 9 years old, perhaps 10, perhaps 11, old enough to travel alone, old enough to carry responsibility, young enough to still see wonders, young enough to regard the world with reverence. And it sat completely still, very quiet, very concentrated at the window, motionless, as though waiting for someone, for something coming, for a friend, for a moment that would surely come every summer again. The child explained to me, with a seriousness, with a weight that I usually only see in older people, in people who've lived long, that it made this same journey every summer, this route, this exact line every year, reliably, faithful as a promise. Always on this route from Bern to Interlaken, always on this train, always in this season, in summer, when the nights are long. And every summer there's a special moment, a magical instant, a moment that's waiting for the child. When the moon rises, even though it's not yet properly dark, when the sky is still pink and golden, still filled with daylight, still warm. And the child must absolutely look out the window and greet the moon. Not simply look at it, not simply observe like a scientist, but really greet it, actively, consciously, with full presence and love. The child said seriously that the moon waits for the greeting, that the moon waits for this child, for this yearly meeting, for this ritual, for this attention, for this love. The child said with absolute certainty that it's wrong, it's unjust, it's almost immoral to ignore the moon when you see it, when it becomes visible. That it's a neglect, a kind of cosmic rudeness, a disrespect of the contract between the child and the moon. I asked carefully how one properly greets the moon, and the child took out the notebook, carefully, very slowly, as though holding a sacred, holy book, a Bible, a shrine, a relic, with reverence, with almost awe, with love. Inside were pictures, many pictures, drawings, watercolors, colored pencils, one for each summer, one for each moon the child had seen, experienced, met, all the years since it could remember. The moon always looked the same, superficially speaking, but not quite, never quite identical. Each moon was different. Once it was larger, bigger, and closer, almost within reach, as though you could touch it, as though it would fit in your hand. Once it was closer to the horizon, at the horizon, as though it were embracing the earth, as though comforting it. Once it seemed to smile, to grin, a crescent smile, full of joy, full of light. The child said wisely, very wisely, that each moon has a different story, tells a different story, even though it's the same moon, the same celestial body, that the moon changes, is changed, depending on what happens in the world, depending on who looks at it, who greets it, who loves it, depending on who observes, who listens, who looks with the heart. Then I saw it too. Saw what the child saw, what the child sees every year. The moon rose, still very faintly, in the bright sky still, in the rose-golden sky. So gently, so tenderly, so quietly, as though ashamed, as though arriving unannounced, so gentle like a secret. And the child sat up straight, attentive, concentrated, respectful, and placed a small hand on the chest, on the heart, on the place where love sits, where courage sits. The child didn't say much, didn't speak much, only a few words, only what was necessary. The child only said, quietly, solemnly, like a prayer, like a ceremony, Good evening, Moon. Good evening, dear friend. I'm here again. I've returned to you. It's good to see you again after so long. I have much to tell you, much since last year. I've grown older. The world has changed. But you've stayed the same. You've remained faithful. And I'm grateful, truly grateful. Grateful in my heart that you could wait, that you endured, that you're here, that you've remained faithful to me.
Then the child drew a colorful bracelet from the pocket, shining red and gold, precious colors, protective colors, lucky colors, and opened the notebook, the sacred notebook. Wrote something in it, wrote intently, seriously, with full devotion, with all its soul. The child wrote quickly, very quickly, but also carefully, precisely, with a clever, skilled hand, with the hand of an older, more mature person, with a hand that has experienced, that knows. The child wrote what it had to tell the moon, its stories, its experiences, the small and large moments. The child wrote what it had learned in the past year, what was newly learned and experienced, what was difficult to experience, what fears there were, what pain, what was beautiful, what was wonderful, what joy arose. Wrote it all down, everything important, everything that counts, everything in the presence of the moon, under the gentle gaze of the moon, under its mild, divine attention, under its approval, under its love. I said to the child, gently, admiringly, with great respect, "That's a beautiful tradition. That's really, truly beautiful. That's wonderful." And the child answered quickly, confidently, without doubt, "It's not a tradition. It's a friendship, a real, deep friendship. The moon is my friend, my true friend, almost my best friend. But I can only speak with the moon every 12 months, only when I traveled this route, only on this special journey from Bern to Interlaken. The moon sits high above, everywhere, over the earth, everywhere in the world, for all people. The moon is omnipresent, is everywhere, for every human child. But this moon, this special moon here, over the route from Bern to Interlaken, over my favorite mountains, the mountains of Zermatt, this moon knows me, knows my heart, knows my dreams, knows my hopes. This moon waits for me every year, waits faithfully, waits for our meeting, for our encounter, for our friendship." The child stood up slowly, very slowly, carefully, most mindfully, to take its luggage, to pack its adventure, to prepare for the next journey. A small rucksack, glowing red with embroidered stars, gold, tender and precious like the child itself, like a heart. The child got off at Interlaken, the magical city, the mountains, the place of souls, with the notebook under its arm, under protection, the pictures inside, all the moons, all the meetings, all the encounters, the pictures of all the moons from all the past years, the words of all the greetings, all the declarations of love, all the secrets. But not before the child looked once more toward the window, gazed out, full of love, full of gratitude, where the moon still hung in the bright sky, beautiful beyond measure, wonderful, now clearer than ever, clearer than before, glowing bright, almost yellowish, orangish, bright as a torch, bright as a blessing, bright as love itself. And the child blew the moon a kiss, a real kiss, tender, faint, with a gesture that was as natural as breathing, as heartbeat, as something the child had done its whole life, instinctively, lovingly, consciously. A sacred appointment between a child and the moon, repeated year after year, faithful, reliable, eternal, imperishable. Now I sit here, alone again, alone in my compartment, lost in my thoughts. And I think of this friendship, this wonderful, sacred bond, this love, this soul connection between a child and the moon. I think that perhaps it's the child,
Perhaps truly the child, not I, not the adults, who know everything, who've learned how to travel, how to truly travel, how to meet the things you love, how to be present. Not to arrive somewhere, not to reach destinations, not to be fast, but to meet the things that wait, that are reliable, that are faithful, that love you, that you can love. The moon is risen, is visible, is there, high in the sky. The train carries on through the bright summer night, the long, bright, wonderful summer night. And I could also greet the moon if I'm brave enough, if I dare, if I open my heart. Someone will hear me, perhaps. The moon will hear me, will understand my voice, will see me. And I'm not alone, never alone, was never alone, was absolutely never alone. And my eyes grow heavy from this reality, from this important, sacred truth, this truth of connection, this truth of friendship, heavy from the tenderness of this world, this good, gentle, loving world. And I sink slowly, so slowly, into the golden moonlight, into the safety of the night, into the arms of the moon. The rattle of the wheels has a rhythm tonight, a special rhythm, a rhythm that pulses like a heart that reminds me of a journey on the line from Goslar to Wienenberg, through the Harz, through the mountains, in the deepest autumn, many years ago, almost decades ago, in a completely different time, when I didn't yet know that railways can have secrets, that trains preserve magic, that rails carry dreams, that there are places not on the map, but existing nonetheless. The train passed a station, a stop, a small, old station that wasn't listed on the timetable, not on my schedule, not on the official list. I saw the name only briefly, in a fleeting moment, an instant, on a weathered old sign, almost overgrown with moss, green, beige, old, forgotten, as though time itself wanted to forget it. The station was small, very small, tiny almost, with just a little house made of stone, gray, dark stone that looked like bones, like the remains of something past. And there were no people getting off or on, no movement, no activity. The train didn't even brake properly. It didn't slow down. It just rolled past, lightly, as though not seeing the station, not noticing it, not acknowledging it, as though the station didn't exist. I asked the conductor, carefully, cautiously, where this name came from, this forgotten station, this invisible stop. And the conductor looked at me, strangely, with astonishment, as though I'd said something impossible, as though I'd claimed something crazy, as though I were mad. He said, with certainty, with conviction, "There's no station there. There's only an old house, a building, abandoned, decayed, empty." The house was once a station, a thriving station, with people, with activity, with life. But that was 60 years ago, a whole generation ago, almost a century ago. Since then, the train has gone past, rolled past, ignores the old station because the line was renovated, because traffic changed, shifted, modernized, because the times changed, because the world turned, because time willed it that old places would be forgotten, that old things would disappear. "But," said the conductor quietly, very quietly, very, very quietly, and there he lowered his voice, almost to a whisper. He lowered his voice as though revealing a secret. "Sometimes, very rarely, hardly ever, people see this station. Some passengers see it. Sometimes they call me and say, 'There's a station, a stop, not listed on the map, not on the official list, that the train ignores, that the train passes by.' And always, every time, when someone sees it, observes it, really sees it, it's because that person has lost something on this line, something important, something they're searching for without knowing they're searching, unconsciously. Something important enough that the railway remembers it, important enough that the rails remember it, important enough that the train can't forget it. The conductor told me urgently, with a voice that sounded very far away, ancient, age-wise, as though speaking of time, of the secrets of time, that the forgotten station is only visible to those who need it, that only those who have lost something see it, that the railway has secrets, secret places, places that only the railway guards, that only the rails know, that only the wind knows. Some passengers travel this route hundreds of times, thousands of times, and never see it, roll past, blind. And that's right too, because these people don't need to see it, don't need this place, aren't ready. But some people who have lost something, who search without knowing they search, some people see the station out the window, just briefly, a fleeting moment, just for a moment. And it means for them that something that is past, that has died, yet has another chance to be welcomed once more, one last time, one final greeting. A chance to say goodbye, to bid adieu, to say thank you. A chance to understand, to grasp that not everything that goes, that disappears, is also truly forgotten. That the railway, too, has a kind of memory, a long, faithful, infinite memory. I looked out the window again, out through the window into the darkness, into the black, endless, deep darkness, into the night of the hearts, and for a brief moment, a very brief, fleeting moment, just an instant, I saw the station again, saw it more clearly now, more clearly than the first time, clearer than ever. Not as certain, tangible reality, not as a physical, solid place, not as something you could touch, but as possibility, as an option that stood open, that was always possible, that still is possible, that exists for me. And I understood slowly, from the beginning slowly, step by step, that on this journey I was searching for something that unconsciously, instinctively, without knowing it, without being able to express it, without understanding it, without being able to name it. Something important that I'd lost years ago, many years ago, almost decades ago, on this same route, when I was still young and hopeful and ignorant, full of dreams. And the station was there for me, waiting for decades, to tell me that I may see it, that it may be visible, that the lost thing still exists, still lives, that it doesn't simply disappear, doesn't get erased, isn't forgotten just because the line was changed, just because time moved forward, because the world kept turning, because everything changed, because I grew older. The conductor disappeared again, into his compartment, into the night, without speaking further, without further explanation, without a word. And I remained alone with the window, alone with my thoughts. And all night, the whole long, magical night, from Goslar to Wienenberg, through the dark Harz, I saw everywhere along the rails small signs, small stations, not on the map, not on official maps, but there, physically real, concrete, for those who need them, who search. I saw in the darkness stations, forgotten stations that don't exist, don't anymore. I saw rails, old rails, leading into mist, into the unknown. I saw lights in houses, small lights that had no names, that nobody knew. And every time I saw something like that, saw the light, I knew that someone, somewhere on this train, on another route, saw the same thing, was also searching, also looking for something lost, something forgotten, wanted it back. The journey ended. Finally, it ended. Wienenberg came, the station, the destination, the arrival. I got off, carefully, slowly, tired, and the night around me was normal again, normal like any other night, like any ordinary, everyday night. The forgotten station was no longer to be seen, had vanished, was no longer present, no longer visible, no longer real. The secrets of the railway had hidden themselves again, had withdrawn into the rails, into history, into time, into memory, into the unconscious. Now I travel this route again, the same route from Goslar to Wienenberg, through the hearts, in the darkness. And I look for the forgotten station. I look out, hopefully, carefully. I don't see it this time, not on this journey, not in this night. But perhaps that's all right too. Completely all right, completely right. Perhaps I've already seen what I needed to see, what was important, what I needed. Perhaps I've rolled past without stopping, without getting off, and in that lay grace. The grace of acceptance, the grace of understanding that not everything can be held, that not everything can stay forever. The train carries on. The rails lead into darkness, into the unknown, into the future. And everywhere I travel, there are stations not on the map. The railway carries them with it in its memory. Stations that wait. Stations that are only visible when you need them, when you're ready, when you can be ready. And my eyes grow heavy, grow weaker from traveling, from time, from the years. And I roll past, carry on, sometimes without seeing, and yet I see everything. Everything remains, everywhere, always, forever.
The train carries on. I don't know what time it is, and I don't much care. The night has reached that depth where time stops mattering. Outside it's dark, completely dark. Only now and then a single light in the distance, a farmhouse, a crossroads, a lonely lamp burning for no one, or for everyone. My compartment is warm and still. The reading lamp casts its golden glow on the blanket, and the rattle of the wheels has grown so quiet it sounds like a whisper, like someone telling me a story I already know, but want to hear again and again. I think of them all. The people I've met, on trains like this one, in nights like this. Each has given me something, a word, an image, a truth I've carried with me like a small light in my pocket. And now, in this hour, when the night is deepest and the silence most full, now they all shine at once, like the lamplighter's lamps, one after another, until a path of light comes into being. The watchmaker, with her steady hands and her little shop in La Chaux-de-Fonds, where 100 watches tick all at once and together sound like rain on a roof. Time doesn't pass, she said. It transforms. And everything we've experienced is still there, in another form, in another shape. But it's there. Nothing is lost. I hear her words, and I hear the ticking, soft and steady, like the rattle of this train. The shepherd, with his silver-grey eyes and his hands that stroked so many sheep. The patience of the mountains, he said, the patience of stone, lying still for millions of years. The patience of grass returning each spring. The patience of water. And I feel this patience now, in my bones, in my breath, in the way my body grows heavier and sinks deeper into the cushions, without haste, without fear, like a stone that's found its place. The painter, with her chestnut eyes and her scarf of 1,000 colors. You must be able to let the light go, she said. You must know when it's enough, when to put the brush down.
And the empty spaces, those are the most important. I'm letting go now. The day's images, the thoughts, the worries that feel so big in the daytime and grow so small at night. I let them go, the way she let go of the light, without regret. Because it comes back tomorrow, different, but it comes. The captain, with his great hands and his broad-legged stride. "The river knows the way," he said. "You only have to trust. You only have to go with it. Follow its curves. Trust its rhythm." And I trust now. This train carrying me through the night. This rhythm that rocks me. This darkness that isn't threatening, but warm and soft and full of promise. The river knows the way, and the train knows it too. And I only have to be here and let myself be carried. The beekeeper, with her honey-colored eyes and her strong hands. "The bees know when it's time," she said. "They follow no plan, no clock. They follow the rhythm of the world. And I follow this night's rhythm now, the rhythm of the train, the rhythm of my breath, which grows slower and deeper and more steady, like the humming of 50 hives on a hill in Provence." The carpenter, with his wooden hands and his silence. "Wood tells stories," he said. "Every knot is a chapter. Every scar is a memory the tree doesn't hide, but turns into something beautiful." And I think of my own scars, the places where life has shaped me. And I'm grateful for every one, because they've made me who I am. In this train, in this night, in this moment. The lamplighter, with her dark eyes that glowed like the gas lamps of Prague. "Every light counts," she said. "You don't need to illuminate the whole night. Just one light, then the next, then the next." And I see the lights now, the little lights in the distance, slipping past the train window. One, then the next, then the next, like lamps on a path someone's lit for me, through the night, towards sleep, towards rest. And the cartographer, with his ink-stained fingers and his leather book full of drawn worlds. "The most beautiful paths aren't on maps," he said. "The best paths find us, not the other way around. And this path here, this path through the night, through all these stories, through all these voices, this path has found me, and I'm grateful. So grateful." The train carries on, slower now, or so it seems to me. The rattle is only a whisper now. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And the lights outside grow fewer, and the silence grows deeper and fuller. Watches ticking like rain. Sheep breathing on a high pasture. Light falling over a lake. A river that knows its way. Bees humming in lavender. Wood whispering stories. Lamps blooming like flowers. And paths, invisible paths, finding us in the night. My eyes close of their own accord, and I let it happen. The images blur, The voices grow quieter. The stories flow into one another, like rivers flowing to the sea, like colors mixing on wet paper, like the ticking of 100 watches slowly going silent, one by one. The train carries on through the night, and I go with it, light and warm and safe, without destination, without haste. Only the rattle, only the silence, only the path unfolding before me, in the darkness, in the warmth, in sleep. Only dreaming now, only dreaming